Giddy up! Yeah!
Subscribe to Wild West Soul Stories. Hit the bell, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.
The morning sun painted the dusty streets of Copper Valley gold as Martha Holloway swept the wooden porch of her family's general store. Her calloused hands gripped the broom handle tight, her simple brown dress covered by a faded apron that had seen better days. She paused to push a strand of mousy brown hair from her face, squinting against the brightness as she watched the stagecoach roll into town. Martha was 23 years old, and she had long ago accepted her place in the world. She was the practical daughter, the one who kept the store running, who balanced the ledgers, who knew exactly how many pounds of flour remained in the back room. She was not the daughter people noticed when they walked through the door. That honor belonged to her younger sister, Rosalind. As if summoned by thought alone, Rosalind appeared beside Martha on the porch, her golden hair catching the sunlight like spun silk. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement as she watched the stagecoach come to a stop in front of the hotel, across the street. "I heard someone important is coming to town today," Rosalind said, her voice carrying the musical quality that made men stop and stare. "A cattleman from Montana. They say he bought the old Harrison Ranch and is looking to settle down." Martha continued sweeping. "That is nice. Martha, do you not understand what this means? A wealthy cattleman, young and unmarried, coming to our little town." Rosalind clasped her hands together. "Mother says I should wear my blue dress to church on Sunday." Martha felt a familiar ache in her chest, the one she had learned to ignore years ago. She loved her sister dearly. Rosalind was kind-hearted and sweet, never intentionally cruel. But there was an innocence to her beauty that made her unaware of how her words sometimes landed on Martha's plain shoulders. "I am sure you will look lovely," Martha said, and she meant it. The stagecoach door opened, and a man stepped out onto the dusty street. Even from this distance, Martha could see he was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair visible beneath his hat. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to wide-open spaces and hard work. Rosalind gasped softly. "Oh my." Martha turned away and went back inside the store. There was inventory to count and orders to place. That was her world, and she had made peace with it. The stranger's name was Caleb Thornton, and within 2 days the entire town knew everything about him. He was 30 years old, had built his fortune through honest work and smart decisions, and had come to Copper Valley seeking a quieter life. The women of the town immediately began calculating which of their daughters might catch his eye. No one calculated Martha into those equations. Caleb first entered Holloway's general store on a Tuesday afternoon. Martha was alone behind the counter, carefully writing out an order for fabric when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up and found herself meeting the greenest eye she had ever seen. "Good afternoon," Caleb said, removing his hat. His voice was deep and warm, like the sound of distant thunder on a summer evening. "I am looking for some supplies. Rope, nails, and whatever tools you might have for fence mending." Martha nodded, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her stomach. "The rope is along the back wall. Nails are in the bins by the window. Tools are hanging on the pegboard beside them." She expected him to walk away immediately, as most customers did. Instead, he lingered at the counter, his eyes scanning the store with obvious appreciation. "This is a well-organized establishment," he said. "I have been in plenty of general stores across the territories, and most of them are chaos. A man could find what he needs here without any trouble." Martha felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. I believe a store should serve its customers efficiently. You run this place yourself?" "My father owns it, but I manage the daily operations. My mother helps when she can, and my sister assists with customers." Martha paused, then added, almost against her will, "My sister is the one people usually remember." Caleb tilted his head slightly, studying her face in a way that made Martha want to look away. But she held his gaze, refusing to show weakness. "Is that so?" he said quietly. Then he smiled, and Martha felt something shift in her chest. I will go find those supplies now. He spent nearly an hour in the store that day, asking Martha questions about the town, the people, the weather patterns, and the best places to find good grazing land. She answered each question thoroughly, surprised by his genuine interest in her opinions. When he finally left, his arms full of purchases, he tipped his hat to her. I expect I will be back soon, Miss Holloway. You have been more helpful than you know. Martha watched him go, then shook her head firmly. She was being foolish. A man like Caleb Thornton would not look twice at her, not when Rosalind existed in the same town. As if to prove her point, Rosalind entered the store moments later, having spotted Caleb leaving from across the street. Was that him? The cattleman Rosalind's eyes were wide. What is he like? Is he kind? What did he say? He bought rope and nails, Martha said flatly. We did not discuss poetry. Rosalind laughed, the sound like bells. Oh, Martha, you are always so practical. Yes, Martha thought. That is all I will ever be. Over the following weeks, Caleb became a regular presence at the general store. He came every few days, always with a list of supplies he needed, always staying longer than necessary. He asked Martha about her favorite books, and when she admitted she loved reading but rarely had time, he brought her a worn copy of poetry he had carried with him from Montana. Everyone deserves beauty in their life, he said simply when he pressed the book into her hands. Martha did not know what to say. No one had ever given her a gift that was not practical. No one had ever looked at her the way Caleb was looking at her now, as if she was something precious rather than merely useful. But she reminded herself that he was simply being kind. Surely he was working up the courage to ask about Rosalind. Surely these visits were just a pretense to be near her beautiful sister. She waited for the inevitable question, but it never came. Instead, Caleb asked if Martha would like to accompany him to check on a section of his property where wildflowers grew thick in the spring. He wanted to know if they would be suitable for grazing, or if they should be preserved for their beauty. You want my opinion on flowers? Martha asked, certain she had misunderstood. I want your opinion on everything, Caleb replied. You see things clearly, Miss Holloway. You do not tell people what they want to hear. You tell them the truth. That is rare and I value it. Martha went with him that Saturday afternoon, riding in his wagon through countryside she had seen 1,000 times, but had never really appreciated. Caleb pointed out hawks circling overhead, deer tracks in the soft earth, and the way the light changed as clouds moved across the sun. You notice everything, Martha observed. I have learned that life passes quickly if you do not pay attention, Caleb said. I spent too many years focused only on building my fortune. I nearly missed everything that actually mattered. Martha looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that surprised her. Loneliness. Despite his success, despite his easy manner, Caleb Thornton was lonely. What changed? She asked softly. He was quiet for a long moment, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. I woke up one morning in my big empty house, and I realized I had no one to share it with. All that land, all those cattle, and not a single person who would notice if I disappeared. He glanced at her. I decided to find a place where I could build something different. A home, not just a house. A life, not just a living. Martha understood that feeling more than she could express. She had spent her entire life surrounded by family, by customers, by the constant activity of the store, and yet she often felt invisible, present but not seen, useful but not valued. That sounds like a worthy goal, she said. Caleb smiled at her, and this time Martha let herself smile back. The town began to talk as small towns always do. People noticed that Caleb Thornton spent more time at Holloway's general store than any of his purchases required. They noticed that he sought out Martha's company at church socials, asking her to walk with him rather than dancing with the eligible young women who hoped to catch his eye. They noticed, and they whispered. I do not understand it, Martha overheard Mrs. Patterson say to Mrs. Cooper outside the store one afternoon. That man could have his pick of any woman in town, Why does he spend all his time with the plain sister when Rosalind is right there? Martha's hands stilled over the bolt of fabric she was measuring. The words should not have hurt. She had thought them herself 100 times, but hearing them spoken aloud, so casually cruel, made her heart twist painfully. She did not tell Caleb about the whispers. She did not net to see pity in his eyes, or worse, realization. Perhaps he simply had not noticed Rosalind properly. Perhaps once he did, these visits would end. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. And Caleb kept coming. He brought Martha books and small gifts. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, and asked about her dreams for herself. When she admitted that she had never really allowed herself to dream, he looked at her with such tenderness that she had to look away. "Everyone should have dreams, Martha," he said. It was the first time he had used her given name, and she felt it like a touch. Even those who believe dreams are not meant for them. Spring arrived in Copper Valley with an explosion of wildflowers and birdsong. The town prepared for its annual spring dance, and for the first time in her life, Martha found herself wondering what it would be like to attend on the arm of someone who had chosen her. But that was foolish. Caleb had never spoken of courtship. He had never declared any intentions. He was her friend, perhaps the truest friend she had ever known. But surely that was all he wanted. She was wrong. The evening before the spring dance, Caleb arrived at the general store just before closing time. Rosalind was arranging ribbons near the window, her beauty catching the fading sunlight like a painting come to life. Their mother was in the back room, and their father was at the bank settling accounts. Martha was behind the counter. As always, Caleb walked past Rosalind with a polite nod and stopped directly in front of Martha. His expression was serious, almost nervous, and Martha felt her heart begin to race. "Miss Holloway," he said, then corrected himself. "Martha, I need to speak with you about something important." Martha's mouth went dry. "Of course." He reached across the counter and took her hand. His palm was warm and callous, Ed from honest work. And Martha felt electricity travel up her arm at his touch. "I came to Copper Valley looking for a fresh start," Caleb said. "I thought I knew what I wanted. A quiet life, good land, maybe eventually a family. But I did not expect." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I did not expect you." Martha's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Mr. Thornton." "Caleb, please, I do not understand what you are saying." "Then let me be clear." He tightened his grip on her hand, his green eyes never leaving her face. "From the moment I walked into this store, you have captivated me, not with beauty that fades or charm that deceives, but with truth, with strength, with a spirit that sees the world clearly and meets it without flinching." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes. "There are others who would make you a better match. My sister." "I have no interest in your sister," Caleb interrupted firmly. "She is a lovely young woman, but she is not you. She does not challenge me. She does not make me want to be better. She does not occupy my thoughts from morning until night." A sob caught in Martha's throat. "You do not know what you are saying. I am plain. I am practical. I am not the kind of woman men write poems about." Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Martha's breath caught. "I have written you poems," he said softly. "In my head, every night before I sleep, I have composed letters I was too afraid to send. I have imagined 1,000 conversations where I tell you exactly how much you mean to me." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "Martha Holloway, you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. You are kind without expecting thanks. You are intelligent without seeking praise. You carry the weight of your family's business on your shoulders, without complaint, and you are beautiful in ways that most people are too blind to see." Martha was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks unchecked. "Caleb, I am asking you to marry me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am asking you to share my life, my home, and my future. I am asking you to let me spend every day proving to you that you deserve to be loved." The store was silent, except for Martha's quiet sobs and the distant sound of the evening wind. Rosalind stood frozen by the window, her hand pressed to her heart, her eyes wide with surprise, but also something that looked like happiness for her sister. Martha looked at the ring, at Caleb's hopeful face, at the evidence that someone had finally seen her, really seen her, not as the practical sister or the plain one or the woman who kept the ledgers straight, but as Martha, as someone worthy of love. "Yes," she whispered. Then stronger, "Yes, I will marry you." Caleb's face transformed with joy. He came around the counter and gathered her in his arms, holding her close as she cried against his shoulder. She could feel his heart beating rapidly, matching her own, and she realized that he had been just as afraid of rejection as she had been afraid to hope. "I was so certain you would choose her," Martha murmured into his chest. Caleb pulled back, cupping her face in his hands and wiping her tears with his thumbs. "There was never any choice to make. It was always you, Martha." From the very first moment, Rosalind rushed over and embraced her sister, crying happy tears of her own. "I am so pleased for you," she said earnestly. "You deserve this. You have always deserved this." Rosalind had never wanted to eclipse her. She had simply been living her own life, unaware of the shadow Martha believed she cast. The wedding took place 2 months later, in the small church at the center of Copper Valley. Martha wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Wildflowers from the meadow on Caleb's ranch filled the church, their sweet scent perfuming the air. As Martha walked down the aisle toward the man who had chosen her, she felt the weight of years of loneliness and invisibility lift from her shoulders. The townspeople who had whispered about the plain sister watched now with new eyes, seeing what Caleb had seen all along, a woman of strength and grace and quiet beauty. Caleb took her hand at the altar, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You are everything," he whispered. "You have always been everything." Martha smiled, her heart fuller than she had ever imagined possible. "I thought you would choose her." "I chose you," Caleb replied, "and I will choose you every day for the rest of my life." The minister began the ceremony, but Martha barely heard the words. She was too busy memorizing this moment, this feeling of being truly seen and deeply loved. All those years of believing she was meant for a small life, a practical life, a life without romance or passion, had been wrong. She had simply been waiting for the right person to recognize what she had always carried within her. As they exchanged vows and rings, as they were declared husband and wife, Martha understood something profound. Beauty was not just in golden hair or sparkling eyes. It was in loyalty and truth and steadfast love. It was in the ability to see others clearly, even when the world looked past them. Caleb had seen her when no one else did, and in his eyes she had finally learned to see herself. They walked out of the church into bright afternoon sunlight, husband and wife ready to begin their life together. The ranch was waiting, with its wide open spaces and endless possibilities. The future stretched before them like the Montana sky Caleb used to call home. Martha looked up at her husband and smiled. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing me." Caleb kissed her forehead, his arms wrapped around her. "The choice was the easiest one I ever made." And as they rode away from Copper Valley toward their new life, Martha finally understood that she had never been invisible at all. She had simply been waiting for the one pair of eyes that would see her clearly. Now that she had found them, she would never feel invisible again.